Thank you for joining IAB There.
Hi, I'm Cheryl Goldstein, EVP Member Engagement and Development here at the IAB. Welcome to IAB There, our daily live stream in which we connect the digital advertising ecosystem. Today, I'm really excited to speak with our special guest, Jan Zlotnick, who's a brand strategist and creative director at Sprinkler, where we are going to be talking about modern marketing and how exit equals entry. A little about Jan. Jan is the global head of brand strategy and creative direction for Sprinkler, the double unicorn leader in customer experience management, or CXM. Jan has deep experience in brand strategy and creative development, working not only at major agencies, but he's had several agencies and consultancies of his own. He's also recently published a book called 23 Things I Wish I Could Ask My Mom and Dad Today, and I'm looking forward to hearing more about that. Let's bring Jan Zlotnick to the screen. Hi, Jan.
Hey, Cheryl.
So good to see you.
Same
How are
here.
you?
And who's taking a nap behind you?
These are my constant companions. They've become my new background
They're so
screen. If you,
really
they're
cool.
with me all day, every day. Poncho and Camden. They in the morning. I'm like, let's time to bring your dogs to work day. They just follow down and get in their little beds.
I just came in from outside with our little Kingsley, and he's loving walking in these white marshmallowy type of canyons now, with our two feet of snow.
My dogs are petrified. They look at it, it's like potential avalanche. They're just like, what? Anyway, Jan, we've got a lot to talk about. I want to start with first, congrats on your new role at Sprinkler. I want to get to that because you're just starting there this week, right?
Yeah, last week. It's like just 1 week, sure.
Yeah, so I definitely want to get to that. But right before Sprinkler, you had a very interesting business going called the Exit Brand Agency. And it's all about starting with exit and then planning your vision from there. Let's talk a little bit about that philosophy and maybe a little about your background in the agency biz. Maybe start there first, and then I want to hear about Exit Brand.
Yeah, well, I
So,
go back, yeah, to the agency
yeah.
world and big agencies like Saatchi, and then my own agency in Tribeca called the Zlotnick Group for 10 years. And then toward the end of the Zlotnick Group, or the 10th anniversary of the Zlotnick Group, which was around 2008, which was a momentous time for business, right?
I remember it well. Yep.
Yeah. One of my clients, Globop, which was a financial fintech company, and it was a technology platform for hedge funds to just get data faster and better. It matters a lot in finance that those numbers are what you call reconciled. And before the 2008 collapse, there wasn't really a lot of investment by big companies in really great technology, to believe it or not, to make sure that those numbers were right. And so after the collapse, that became a big deal. So I had this client, Globop, and they asked me, because I was just doing some branding strategy, some just thinking for them. They said, well, we need a CMO, so help us find that. And I said, well, there's this was 2009. There's this, or 2008, 9. There's this thing called digital transformation that's coming, and it's not going to be your usual CMO that you need, and it's probably not a recruiter that you're going to be able to find so easily. So I fast forward, they said, well, what about you? And I said, well, I'm not a CMO. I mean, it sounds great because it would be, I guess, a rung up or financially good for me on my resume, but and maybe a career move. But I said, I'm a creative director. I'm a writer. I'm a strategist. I like to make things, not be in meetings all day. And they said, cool, we get that. And I spoke with the founder and CEO, and he said, we just need you to be our CMO, but you're going to do our branding. So I took the title CMO, but I was their brand strategist and creative director. And we achieved the exit strategy in this case about 3 years early. We had like a 5-year plan at that time, which is probably too long for an exit strategy. But in about 2 years, we were bought by SS&C, and the combined forces, they both were in the top 10 anyway, became the second or third largest hedge fund technology platform in the world.
Wow.
With almost $1 trillion in assets under management. So with that, with that great experience, having branded Globop so that they could be seen by the big companies for their exit, which was either IPO or acquisition, turned out to be acquisition. I along with the rest of C-level, turned over. We all went to find new jobs or went to islands to relax a little bit. And I was having lunch in the Whole Foods in Union Square after 2 consulting gigs, pitches. And out of the blue came a call from a guy named Reggae Thomas from a thing called Sprinkler. I thought it was this musician that was into reggae music, and he had this really cool idea to combine reggae music with sprinkler systems for your, fire protection. Turns out, of course, it was Raji Thomas toward the beginning of his really rocket ship called Sprinkler. And he said, would you like to come in? It's already 4 or 5 o'clock. I had another hour and a half to get home by commute to New Jersey. But I really was intrigued by our conversation. So I went in and we ended up whiteboarding till like 11 at night. We started working on the values, the branding. There's no brand. There was like Series A and funding of around, or valuation around 80 million. And that was the start. He asked me to stay on and be their strategist and creative director. And we launched the brand together. There's nothing like doing that with a CEO founder.
Yeah.
4 years later.
Nothing like having that kind of synergy too, like the first time you meet and you're just whiteboarding together and it just clicks like that.
You're
I
right.
love when that happens.
You're right, because
that's special. That's really special when that happens.
That's so rare. You're right. And he had me come to Vegas for the first sales summit. And so now I'm embedded. They asked me to stay, and we started building the brand from there. 4 years later, that $80 million valuation in 4 years was 1.8 billion.
Wow.
So that is one of the fastest rocket ships in any industry. I mean, that's up there with, the big ones of the world.
Oh, yeah.
And then from there, I left Sprinkler, and I was interested in this company that had this amazing, it was an ad tech company called Grapeshot. And they had this amazing algorithm for making programmatic better. Programmatic's really good in terms of its efficiency, its speed, but not really good with context. You end up being not only in an unsafe place with other editorial that might be damaging and off-brand, but you actually don't reach your customer as narrowly as you can. And Grapeshot was a truly unique algorithm, a genius algorithm by the founder owner who came up with this in Cambridge like 15 years before for another purpose. And it allowed programmatic to have this Grapeshot signal go in and not just read the URL, which let's say it was Jaguar. Is that the animal? Is that the football team? Is that the car? What is it that you want? It would read the page and read the page in real time, like not what you were, looking to buy. It's the page on your site or the sites that you're looking at, not what you were looking to buy 2 weeks ago or a week ago or 3 days ago, but right now, today, and the past few days if you want to. And you find out through keywords on the page, not the URL, what the context of that customer is about. And that blew open programmatic. And Grapeshot grew like crazy because of that algorithm and programmatic, having its time come to them in this year of 2017. So in that case, we needed to build the brand fast. They wanted an exit. And the CEO founder actually said, I want to be seen and felt as a major player at this big conference, tech conference called Demexco in Cologne, Germany. In October, early October in 2000, this was 2017. And so it was like a real direct mission. And it was like going from, the process that I use, which is going to customer insight, brand position, and then creating that brand. And in this case, the booth, all the materials, the video, the whole experience. And the CEO, I know this sounds hard to believe, but it's amazing because he actually said, which I guess sounds kind of natural, he said, I want us to be seen by the major players in the world. I want us to be seen by the oracles of the world.
Right.
Well, we got acquired by Oracle, and
Ah,
so that was their exit. So with those three tech companies, we have
yeah.
fintech with Globop, marketing tech or martech with Sprinkler, and ad tech with Grapeshot. I gathered my team that I worked with over that decade of those three major
Hmm.
clients that amassed a kind of maybe $4.2 billion in value. And we were having cocktail celebration on the rooftop of the Restoration Hardware in the meatpacking district. And we said, it's always a kind of a struggle, a little bit of a contention between marketing and financial. Marketing wants to do all these things that aren't all measurable, and finance is like, that's too high a budget, and marketing is a cost, not an asset. It's a little bit of
Right.
a tug of war thing. So,
Sure.
so we said, why don't we go in with the financial story instead of the typical marketing story of how strategic and creative we are? And that led to the
Hence
name.
the exit
Yeah, that led
first.
to the Exit brand.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's
Now
imagining where you want to end up and then starting with that vision in mind.
that's
So
great
how
because
are we
that
planning an exit? And then, so that speaks to the financial guys, right?
it
Because like,
really
look, where do
does.
you want to end up? We want to sell the company. We want to become global. We want to go public. We want to whatever that vision is, and then it's okay if that's where we want to be. So I think you're right. We work with a lot of direct-to-consumer brands, and of course, a lot of startup publishers that just grow and over time get big enough and go, okay, what do we want to do now? What do we want to go public? Do we want to? And maybe they would have made different decisions, hired differently, organized differently if they had known earlier on that they wanted to become a global company and never sell to anybody else or never go public. Or conversely, they were trying to build their assets up so they become valuable to somebody else. So if you knew those things earlier on, would that have changed your decisions? So that's where you
Exactly.
come in, is help them envision that.
Yeah, and it's funny because I ran this by the founder CEO of we became great friends. He you know had his big his big windfall, and he was looking to do his next venture. And so we kept in touch, and I said, I had this idea, and it's the Exit brand. And he said he loves the idea of it, but he doesn't like the name. He said, how could I go in and tell everybody in my company, my people, that we're hiring an agency called the Exit brand? And I said that's really
He's got a point.
exactly. And I said that's
Yeah.
really interesting because a couple of things. First of all, in this progressive era, not to be transparent and let your people know what your plans are. The Stephen Covey, one of the 7 habits of highly effective people is, as you said, a beginning with the end in mind. Having an
Yep.
idea of what your business trajectory is and discussing it, because an exit can be many different things. The exit for LinkedIn to merge, be purchased by Microsoft was a great thing for the people. The culture
Yeah.
flourished under them. So it depends what it is. And what we did is we put together a video, wrote our own manifesto for what Exit brand is. That led to Exit equals entry, which is a
Hmm.
life thing, a spiritual thing. Every exit door is an entry. Every
Right.
exit.
Close one door and open another. Right.
Yeah,
It's a good saying.
when you're going on a trip, when you hit the exit, it's the excitement of the entry of where you're now off the superhighway and you're into this great little town, and
Right.
yeah. So the exit equal entry it was really helpful to us. So I was happy for that criticism.
I think that's great. And honestly, what I see too in a lot of these smaller companies, that's almost more comforting knowing what the exit strategy is than the uncertainty of not knowing what the future of the company is going to be. When you're left in a place of, I don't know if we're going to go public. I don't know if they're going to sell us. I don't know if we're going to get acquired by somebody. I don't know what the management's thinking. And then you're left in that place of uncertainty where you're not clear about what the future of the company, hence the future of your own role. So in some ways, that could be very comforting for employees to have a very clear idea that in 3 years, we're looking to fill in the blank, get acquired, go public, do whatever. I think that that's actually, a good way to keep people engaged and to understand what they're a part of.
And for HR and top management to make sure that every employee has an ownership stake in the
Has a
company.
stake, yeah. Yeah, yeah. I love that. All right, so a couple quick things because you talked about your approach to doing this, to setting that vision and bringing it in. I want to just dive a little bit in that. The conversations with stakeholders, vision planning. Tell me how you set that exit vision and bring it into the present.
You mean like the process of,
The process, yeah. Well, how do
yeah,
you go about doing that?
yeah. Well, it is in some ways traditional, but with a twist, as most great things are. You can, look at an idea in writing, a script, for example, and depending on how it's executed or even tweaked strategically, it can be just another movie or an Oscar winner, a great movie. It can be a good story, or it can be, a Pulitzer Prize winner. So when we start, there's three basic things. It's very simple. Three things, the
Mm.
rule of three, right? Is customer
Mhm.
insight, then category creation or brand category, which is positioning, and then the creative is last, creative branding, marketing. Um, I have a philosophy, and I speak about this at New York University's Stern School of Business. And I always put this up on the slide, and I say, what do you think the most creative act in marketing is? And I get a lot of stuff about, copywriting and art direction and coming up with the
Yeah.
idea, the big idea, stuff like that. And I say, to me, the most creative act in marketing is the brand position.
Mhm.
And if the brand position is not itself creative and category busting, or as Chris Lockwood in Play Bigger says, category creation,
Mhm.
creating a category design is actually his words, then you're just competing. And I know Chris Lockwood is, Lockhead. Chris
Yeah.
Lockhead's Play Bigger is, I know that he's using a little bit of hyperbole, but there's a real truth to what he means, when he says that competition is for losers.
Mm.
What he
Yeah,
means,
he talks about what's your different, I know
yeah,
that
like,
that's his big thing. What makes you you? How are you different?
yeah,
Which means you wouldn't talk about competitors because they're not you.
yeah, he makes. I love his analogy. He says, "Do you really think that Reed Hastings cared about Blockbuster? Do you really think that Steve Jobs cared about, uh, about BlackBerry? You know, they there was
Yeah.
they didn't. The idea of competing with that was out of their head. It was not part of their thought process
Right.
because they were in a category of their own. They created their own category. So the positioning can get there, or it can at least niche down to give
Mm.
you an advantage. So in order to get to that most creative act of marketing, the positioning that differentiates you, the third place that you are, because that's, to me, the gold standard when I talk to the classes at NYU, and most students, and this is the cutting edge MBAs of branding today and marketing. When I ask them what the 3-word brand positioning was back in the day for Starbucks, and that was, when I try to tell them, it's hard for them to believe, there were no places to get coffee before Starbucks.
Right, right,
There was the bohemian little, cafes, but they
right.
still had crappy coffee because it was
Yeah,
exposed to the air, or you in your office or a diner.
yeah.
So I said, the 3 words, what are they? And then when I tell them, it has nothing to do with coffee, because then you'd be competing with all the other coffee companies, the instant coffees, whatever. So I said it was the third place. And then I explained what the third place is and how Howard Schultz
Mhm.
realized that sort of was, because it was cultural between home and office. Americans needed, like Italians already knew, a third place.
Right.
And you'd pay $4 and stand in line to just be in that third place and chill, you know?
Yep. Yep.
So in order to get there, you have to first start with customer insight, of course, right? Research. Here's the tweak. You can't just listen to the customer, because that would go back to the old Henry Ford thing. You'd only build a faster horse. The customer's never going to tell you to go in that, category creation. You've got to come up with that. So the customer insight is about talking to fewer people, no focus groups, fewer people, stakeholders, and listening between the lines, meaning keep asking why, keep listening to them closer, and get to these things that are kind of like the pause in music, that interlude in a musical composition. When you hear that pause, that interlude in music, that's so rich and allows you to make that leap. And when you get that insight, that gets you to this thing called the business you're really in. And there's a whole thing on this from Harvard Business Review that you're probably aware of, and a whole cottage industry about it. So the business that you're in could be software, as it was, or information services, as Grapeshot was in. But the business they were really in was saving people's time in the programmatic area. So customers weren't getting the wrong information, and the programmatic managers themselves, who basically were clicking buttons, weren't wasted time with a PowerPoint presentation that was getting into technology. It was about, we're going to show you something that's going to save you time. We're not going to tell you our technology is the greatest. We know that. That's best practice.
It's like Starbucks isn't in the coffee business. They're in that third place, a place for you to go.
Yeah. And then
business. They're an environment. They're
and then and then you better invest in great coffee.
Yeah. Well, it's like Macy's will tell you they're not a retailer, they're an entertainment company.
Right.
And that the experience when you walk into Macy's should feel, it's all about the experience. You're not there to buy shoes. You're there to experience a brand. You're there to, have tactile, full sensory, sight, sound, motion, so it's an entertainment experience as opposed to shopping. So I totally see what you're saying. I want to get to your book. We don't have that much time left, and I'm really I think people are going to be fascinated by this. I think that's a great conversation. Imagining the future, bring it to what's your exit? Bring it to the present. Hearing between the lines. To your point, Apple will say they didn't build something that people need because people didn't even know they needed it. There's like products that, like, did you even know that you needed? Like when they came out with the iPod, did you even know you needed an iPod? No. So to your point, it's not about listening to customers and what do they need. It's about imagining what's going to make life better for them.
Yeah,
and
listening to what their life pains are, their problems.
Yeah. All right, let's get to this book because I'm fascinated by it. And I have to admit, first of all, it was one of the easiest books to read because there's literally one sentence on a page. So thank you for the quick reading. But aside from that, it got me a little weepy because I lost my dad like 27 years ago. And I kept thinking, what were the things I'd really want to have a conversation with my father about? And it was very touching. I'd love to spend just a few minutes on the genesis of this book, and like why did you do it, and what's come of it?
It probably goes to the core of who I am, which is someone who loves questions and asking questions and getting to that, between the lines thing in my business, but also just as a human being going through this pandemic. I'm sure I'm not the only one. I found myself waking up in the middle of the night and talking out loud, and I'm saying, what is going on? And I started writing down. I always carry a little notebook on me for ideas. I'm a writer at foundational level, and being in creative and strategy, it's always about using your hand and a tool. You can't go to the keyboard first. That just doesn't work. There's no chemistry going on in your brain. You have to use writing instrument. Actually, that's been proven by neuroscience, but I just feel it, that's the way to go. So I keep that little notebook, and I was writing this stuff down when I woke up, and I realized I was asking these questions out loud to my parents who had died many years ago. And And it helped me because I was expressing that and getting it out. That was good for me. But also, it allowed me to realize that, it's not just getting answers from them, which is kind of possible in a way. It's more that I think I needed to hear myself,
Hmm.
articulate these things that were on my mind, and I was listening in effect to myself. And a friend of mine saw this notebook. We were talking on Zoom and said, "You ought to put that in a real book. That could help a lot of people." And I said, "Okay, let me think about how to do that." And that's one of the things I think about the pandemic. Especially if you like to make things and create things, do it.
Yeah.
Most of the time, I save about 4 hours a day in commuting. Right there, I
Yeah.
should be able to do something with my life.
Yeah, right.
So I
I
called
know.
up a great designer who's also an illustrator, and her name is Catherine Budai, or Cat Budai.
Show
B.
some of the illustrations. They're
Yeah,
very simple. Yeah.
and she had lost her father, and I remember we talked a lot about that. And she looked at the questions that touched her deeply, and she created an original piece of art for each question. And there's 23 questions for my mother, 23 questions for my father, but really it's about questions that are universal. In the editing process, I I found myself being careful that anyone could relate to these in almost every case, I think, and not to be repetitive. There are only a few questions that were repetitive for purposeful
Hmm.
reasons. And from a design standpoint, every question had its own spread, because going back to experience, every spread is an experience. I've had people from all over the world write to me. This has been the most gratifying thing, not making money on this book, but hearing how people are having these
Hmm.
conversations now, sparked by these questions, with people who are alive in their lives now.
Right.
And
Well,
my,
some of
my
the questions, just
yeah,
so people can hear, like, what's the most hurtful thing I ever said or did to you? I'm almost afraid to ask somebody that. What's the most hurtful thing you ever said or did to me? What made you feel proud of the life you made? Like, these are really interesting questions, I think, for any relationship, for you to have with your friend, your partner, your parents. What was a time when you had to stand up for yourself? I mean, these are just very interesting, the question we don't normally ask each other.
right.
How
That
was this affected your relationship with your own kids?
you
Have
know
you
that
done a lot of these questions with them?
well, my sons, I have two great sons, Jared and Tyler. Jared works at Google, and
Yep.
Tyler's at Amazon Studios in LA. And they were really proud of me and happy, that I did this. Um, but they said, "Well, what about us, Dad? Like, why aren't we doing this?" And so we started scheduling time. We've had 2 sessions already. And let me tell you, you said it's an easy book to get through. And I've had a lot of that because there's only one question each page. But
Right, right,
it is 100 pages. Um,
right.
and and it's actually, when you're in one question that's deep, or even seemingly easy, like, what was your favorite place to go to? What is your favorite time of day? What that can lead to is mind-boggling, and
Yeah.
sometimes really vulnerable. You have to be vulnerable about it. So we have these kind of happy hour sessions, and we get into it, and it's really rich. And I'm really glad, because they're learning things about me and my history and
Hmm.
stories from my childhood, my relationship with my parents. And then, I'll turn the tables and ask them something. And so it's been great,
Hmm.
with my children.
Yeah, I can imagine. So I highly recommend this. I'm going to do this with with my daughter.
Oh,
Anyway,
great.
Jan, we are out of time. It was always a pleasure to see you. Good luck at Sprinkler. I can't wait to see what you're going to be doing with them. And I look forward to diving into 23 things I wish I could ask my mom and dad today. I'll ask my mom. She's still alive.
I
Jan,
hope,
thank you so much. I'm so glad we had this time together.
thanks, Cheryl.
We'll see you. That was Jan Slotnick, everybody. I'm Cheryl Goldstein. IAB There is a production of the Interactive Advertising Bureau. Our show today was produced by Connor Healy, Joe Aunts, and John Ward. I want to thank the IAB team and thank you for watching.
IAB's next big event is ALM, the annual leadership meeting running the week of March 8th. To find out more, visit www.iab.com/events.